Okay. Trigonometric ratios. Close. Right, okay. So obviously the first thing we know is that little acronym to help us remember the order, SOHCAHTOA.
I could never remember that. It could be
Right, so SOH, sine theta equals O over H, where O and H are opposite hypotenuse and the A is adjacent. Right, remember that it's only for what kind of triangle?
right angle.
Right angle, yep. If this is our angle here, then this one is opposite, this one is adjacent, and the hypotenuse is always the longest side. Okay, but in previous lessons we have learned that sine theta also equals what? Not tan. X or Y? Y. Yeah. Cosine theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse or X. Yep. Tan theta equals opposite over adjacent or Y over X, or of course sine theta over cosine theta. Okay, so we'll go straight into 16E. So, draw yourself a nice big unit circle. Probably half a page. You got a lot of information to squeeze in, so. Right, so. One, negative one, negative one, and one. Okay, I'm just going to label our quadrants. So this is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line to the outside of our unit circle. In here is our angle in radians or degrees. And I'm going to label this point here P A B. It just means point AB. So we know if A is the X value at this point, then like A is going to be here and B is the Y value at that point. So that's going to be B there. Okay, so sine theta Sine theta usually equals what? X or Y? Y, but in this case it equals B. B is our Y, so we're going to say B. Cosine theta in this example equals what? A. And tan theta equals B over A. Very good. Okay, now what happens if I take this point and I go to the other side of the circle in quadrant 2? Yeah. Right, so this is going to be negative A here, but B stays the same. So it's going to be the point negative A, B. Right, what's this angle in here?
Negative. Well, it's still it's the same as
It's the same as theta, so it's still theta. So we can actually call this quadrant 2, well, because this angle here is pi, so it's actually pi minus theta, because it's this whole angle here. So we take pi, which is 180 degrees, and minus theta, you're going to get this angle here. In radians, yeah. So we can say that this quadrant here is pi minus theta. This one would obviously just be theta. Okay, so sine pi minus theta. Sine is our y value. In this case, it's what?
B.
It's still B. Yep. Cosine pi minus theta, negative A. And tan pi, yeah, B over negative A. Oops, sorry about all the scribbles. So what we see is that sine actually stays the same as the first quadrant. Cosine just becomes the negative of the first quadrant. And tan also becomes the negative of the first quadrant. Okay? Right. Now, if I draw down to here, this point is the same distance away, so it's just negative B. So what's the coordinates? Yeah, negative A, negative B. So again, what's this angle in here? It's theta. Right, so we're actually taking pi plus theta to get to that line. So this quadrant is pi plus theta. Yep, so sine pi plus theta. Sine is our y value. What's it in this case? Negative B. Cosine, yep, negative A. And tan, yeah, negative B on negative A. The negatives cancel each other out, so you just get B on A. So you can see that from the first quadrant, sine has become the negative, cosine is also the negative, and tan stays the same. And then last one, quadrant 4. Yep, this is the point A, negative B. What is this angle in here? Yep. So yeah, if we go all the way around and then just minus theta from 2 pi, we get 2 pi minus theta. So sine of 2 pi minus theta equals, negative b cosine 2 pi minus theta, it's a, and tan, yep, negative b on a. So once again, compared to the first quadrant, you get sine is just the negative, cosine stays the same, and tan becomes the negative. So, notes in quadrant 4, which is 2 pi minus theta. 2 pi is equivalent to what? 360 degrees, but it's also equivalent to 0 because that's where you start, right? So therefore, 2 pi minus theta is the same as negative theta. Be helpful if I could spell. Remember. It. Okay, so did you see how in every quadrant some of them become negative, some of them stay the same as quadrant 1? The way that I remember it is think of Sex and the City. Sex and the City. SATC. Right, here. All
stations to Caulfield, and so you Mr. Slaveland.
I've heard of all science teachers are crazy. If you want to remember it that way. But anything that helps you remember. So in this quadrant, in the first quadrant, all of sine, cos, and tan are positive values. In the second quadrant, only sine is positive. In the third quadrant, only tan is positive. Right, sine and cosine become the negative. And in the fourth quadrant, only cosine is positive.
Cosine is
positive. It's a plus VE. Right, so if sine x So this time we're not using theta, we're using x. If it equals 0.4, find what sine pi minus x is. Don't use a calculator. Right, so SATC. Right, so this was theta here. This one is pi minus theta. This one is pi plus theta. And this one is 2 pi minus theta or negative theta. Okay, so the question is asking sine pi minus your angle. So what quadrant is it in? This one. Yeah. So which one of them is positive? Sine is positive, therefore nothing changes. It's the same answer.
Wait, what?
Sorry, I missed that.
Okay.
What happened to all the other stuff?
What other stuff?
Pi and the minus.
Pi.
Nothing.
Right, sine of your angle equals 0.4, and we're looking for pi minus angle, which is this quadrant. We just discovered before that when you have sine in that quadrant, it stays the same as quadrant 1. So it's the same answer. It either, for what we've just learned, it either just stays the same or it becomes negative. Oh, sorry. Okay, oh, sorry. I'm writing the wrong question. Should be sine. Okay, this time find sine of negative x. It's the fourth quadrant. It's this one here. It is negative. So it's just negative 0.4. Because we know in the fourth quadrant, only cosine stays the same. Tan and sine become the negative value. What about sine 2 pi minus angle? It's actually exactly the same as the question above it. Because it's in the same quadrant, yep. Remember, 2 pi minus angle is the same as negative angle. Because 2 pi is equivalent to 0. Okay, so if tan theta equals 1 over root 3, find what tan pi plus theta equals. Yep, it's in the third quadrant, which tan stays positive, so it's just the same answer. Tan negative theta? Yep, cool. So everyone's getting the hang of it. One that's maybe a little bit harder. All right, so if cosine x equals negative cosine pi on 6, and x is between half pi and pi, find what x is. Right, first things first. Look at this bit here. What quadrant is it in?
S.
Yes, it is in this one. Because pi on 2 is this point here and pi is this point here, and it's between them.
Yeah, or it could be.
Okay. Right, so it's in pi minus angle. Okay, so what we say is if our original x value was somewhere in the first quadrant, to find negative cosine pi on 6, we did pi minus our angle. So we did pi minus our original angle, and that gave us this new angle. Right? In the previous questions here, we were never actually given the angle. We were just given theta, saying an angle. Right? If you're given an angle, you can actually work out what pi minus that angle is. And that's what's happening in this question. So you do pi, because you know it's in the second quadrant, so it's pi minus your original angle will give you the angle of the answer, essentially. So all you have to do is rearrange it to find what x is. Yeah, so you get like negative x equals...
Did you also write pi minus theta?
Oh, well, in this question it's x. You can write theta, but...
X is pi and theta.
Yeah, exactly. X is the angle. Yeah. Right, and then obviously multiply by negative 1 throughout. Just get pi minus pi on 6. Sorry, x equals pi minus pi on 6, yep. Okay, then it's just essentially minusing fractions. So we'll just change this to a common denominator. Right. Keep your denominator. What's 6 pi minus pi? Right, so x equals 5 pi on 6.
Oh, because it's the same.
That is the answer. So we were given cosine 5 pi on 6, right? If you go and you take the second quadrant angle of that, so it'd be pi minus theta, which is pi on 6, you get a negative cosine because only in that quadrant is sine positive. Okay, one last thing. Might squeeze it in down here. If you want to actually just do this question on CAS, right, you got cosine x equals negative cosine pi on 6. How do you get x on its own?
Sine x.
If you were to do it a little bit by hand. Yes, you take the inverse cosine over.
Oh, I don't know.
Right, you should remember that from your trig ratios. Right, you can type that into the CAS and it'll give you 5 pi on 6.
In the radian.
Yes, it is in radians, so you have to be in radians and you should have it in standard form, not decimal.